Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. My name is Shelly Calhoun-Jones and I'm a principal technologist here at Cohesity. Today we're joined by John from CrowdStrike. John, would you like to do an introduction?
Sure. My name really is John Smith. I'm not 100% sure what my parents were thinking with that, but I've been in the industry for going on 30 years. I am sort of a career foot soldier. Was a big Citrix end user computing person for a long time, spent a lot of years in the federal government, worn a lot of hats. I've been in security probably the last 10, 12 years principally, but yeah, I've been in the industry a long time. I've been a DBA, a Cisco router expert. I pride myself on trying to be a generalist, and currently I'm an integration solutions architect at CrowdStrike.
John, it's great having you. And I love the fact that you are, a professional learner. You've been doing this for a really long time. And that's one of the great parts about security is you just never stop learning. So I'm real excited to have you. And in this episode, we're going to talk more about how we can improve incident response by using a centralized SIEM and log management solution. Now, for a lot of us here, especially if you've worked in the security space for a while, you probably know that one of the biggest challenges that companies are running into is just literally the sheer amount of data that they need to sift through as security practitioners. And this can even be compounded even more if you're supporting a multi-cloud or on-prem workload. And so we're going to deep dive into how we can eliminate this complexity and enable you to detect, respond, and recover quickly. Now, John, based on your experience, what are some of the challenges that companies are running into with the evolving threat landscape?
Well, it's multi-pronged, right? We've seen an increase in, a significant portion of your attacks. I think over 70% of them don't have malware, right? So you've got very effective actors that have gotten really good at leveraging, or if you've heard of lull bins, living off the land. These techniques have gotten really good. So this is certainly a very big challenge for folks, and certainly those are harder to detect. If someone walks up and kicks my door, and clearly that's very suspicious. If someone has a key that they've already made through a phishing attack or something like that, then that's certainly considerably less suspicious, and you need a lot more observability to be able to deal with that. I would say, although they're not as famous today, but the supply chain attacks that we had a few years ago were pretty scary for me, right? We all sort of have this list of MD5 hashes that we trust. We think that the vendors that we install a application for or a signed binary are relatively trusted. The supply chain attacks definitely put us in a position not to trust any, other than maybe the stuff that we compile ourselves in our organizations. It makes it pretty tough to trust our executables. What is a safe MD5 hash today that may not be a safe MD5 hash months down the road? And so now you're in this position of, hey, I need to keep data for a longer amount of time because I need to be able to look at my exposure of a particular hash file or a particular file that's now dangerous. Well, how long has that file been present? And then, in the last 3 years, 2020, we had what I called a shotgun wedding with telework, right, with remote workers. Yep. I started supporting remote workers in 2008 for the CDC, and it's definitely a difficult dynamic. But a lot of the visibility that went with someone who was working on-prem, well, that's you have a lot of security, right? I have a hardened network that has restricted, ACLed off egress and ingress, and all of the other systems that are topological peers to it are all patched. Well, now that same computer or that laptop that you issued your worker is sitting in a coffee shop, where who knows the level of safety that it's at. A lot of the edge base or the perimeter, surveillance that I was doing, well, that's not as relevant now, right? And as much as I would love for the bad actors to send their malware down to VPN 0 so that it would still traverse my internal network, they don't do that. It's going to go down Wi-Fi 0 or something like that. So, the introduction or the shotgun wedding with remote work introduced a level of opacity around observability and surveillance that we had to make a big adjustment to. And those, I think, are some of the bigger things that I've seen.
Right. It gets even trickier with bring your own devices. I mean, it could just literally be their home laptop that they're using to check their work email. What's really funny about that is my husband and I did a trip up to Portland a couple of weeks ago for security B sides. He works for a different company in the industry, but his laptop connected to our hotel Wi-Fi, and their IT freaked out, bricked the system, took him offline, literally reformatted the laptop. He couldn't get
Wow.
on work VPN or anything. So it's a tricky balance. It's like, how aggressive do you want to be if you do have workers that are going on the road? Because clearly you want them to be able to do their job and access their data, but at the same time, you also want to make sure you're getting that full visibility there. So
Yeah, for sure.
slight segue, but when you were talking about that, I was kind of thinking that in the back of my brain.
Sure.
So, what are some other ways that your customers have improved incident response in their environments, just with the changes that we've seen to technology over the last couple of years?
Yeah. Well, for our particular customer base, you have to remember while people tend to think of CrowdStrike as an endpoint protection or endpoint detection and response solution, and we are I work there, but clearly I think we're the best in the industry at that. But CrowdStrike the Falcon portfolio is pretty broad. We started out as a threat intelligence company. We have the industry's best threat intelligence. We have Falcon Complete that provides managed detection and response. And so they can leverage that sort of first line of defense. The Falcon Complete folks are going to be very familiar with the data that they're looking at. And those folks will actually level up our customers' resources as well. And we have Fusion, the way to do some automation. But the two big ones that I'm seeing too that are newer, I hate that sometimes CrowdStrike gets typecast, as an endpoint solution when we're so much more. But it's around identity, right? 62% of attacks involve identities. Our Falcon Identity Protection solution is really improved incident response, being able to see those IDs that are problematic. A lot of times when we say that system is compromised, honestly, more often than not, it's an ID that's being compromised, and now they're sort of running amok on your lateral corridor. And then the last one, and certainly I would say one of my favorites, if not my favorite, is log scale. So we're delivering a next-gen SIEM that's able to provide customers with an index-free solution, and we'll get into that later. But basically, a very petabyte per day scalable log management solution that has dashboards, has functions, that has the ability to post, right? And leveraging that next gen SIEM that's able to log tremendous amounts of data, provide fast search speeds without the burden of having racks and racks of indexing servers to support it. So those are a lot of the ways. It's just taking advantage of the broad Falcon platform.
That is really awesome. So you can really tap into this platform to get a full story of what may have occurred. It could be that you're going back in to do a postmortem. It could also be that you're responding to an active event within your environment. So that is really awesome. So speaking of which, if you are working an active incident, you probably know how important it is to not only respond, but also get your user back online. The challenge to that is that a lot of times what this means is that you're analyzing data as it comes in. I remember when I used to work with large companies at Symantec, and sometimes I would be working with a customer or with one of my contacts, and we could literally be tapped into a database server performing SQL statements as you're trying to pull log data. So really, the challenges for a lot of companies out there is that you want to have the ability to proactively monitor the health and also make sure that you're preventing the adversary from moving laterally through your network. What are some ways that you can think of, John, for how organizations can prepare for this type of event, and still have the ability to respond quickly?
Yep. The first thing you have to do, right, you should prioritize parts of your business. I'm definitely a big believer that every employee is equally important, and that's a very good culture to have. But ultimately, there are certain parts of your organization and the people and the systems that support that part of your organization that are going to be more important than others, particularly those that drive revenue for your company, or those that that deal with or help patients if you're in healthcare, or those that help you if you're a law enforcement agency, right? People that actually do the job. But ultimately, there are parts of your organization that are more important than others, and you need to have a strategy for, who, what, and where. What do they need? What systems? Where are they located? Are they remote? Are they on-prem? And then how do we recover them as quickly as possible? Also, I would say that you want to be able to conduct some drills if possible, right? You don't want, and I say this as a person that has, had to have a disaster recovery incident. And that was the first time I'd ever done it. I didn't know it would take me 7 days to restore an entire volume. So those were some of the lessons that I certainly wish I had known at the time. So conduct those. And post-COVID, I think business continuity is not being treated as a value-added thing anymore, right? I think business continuity over the long term didn't really get the respect that it deserved. Now with COVID, with ransomware, really, right? Backups matter. For a long time in my career, especially early on, the backup person was the new person on the team. That's sort of how you cut your teeth into the industry, and that's great. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have it, and particularly today, if you don't have it, it can be absolutely, if you're a foot soldier like me, it can be a resume generating event for you, but also it can be a serious impact on your company. And so, you really need to take these seriously, because we're not restoring one particular server or one volume. We're in a position where we have to restore an entire organization, and that's something that we haven't had to do. And then ultimately, all of this requires observability, right? We need to be able to see the logs. We need to be able to turn on logging on a number of our systems, and we need to have a solution, a log management solution that can support that sort of observability and the surveillance that it takes to deliver that.
Right. No, that's a really good point on performing regular fire drills. I know when I used to work at Amazon, for a lot of my customers, they would start out by verifying that they could just do a simple backup and restore, and then maybe even consider branching into having a cold site, a warm site, or a hot site that they can roll over to, depending on the severity of the issue. And there's some really cool things that you can use with services like Terraform or CloudFormation, which gives you the ability to quickly spin up an environment so you can get back online, or even use services like Route 53 to fail over your DNS, depending on the severity of the event. So really, really good stuff there, John. I think that's awesome. And, kind of on your note of, just literally having that full observability, there comes the aspect of data, because as we all know, as we move further into the cloud, that means that we also need to make sure that we're observing not just a workload that's on-prem, but maybe also observing workloads that are already out in the cloud. So, as data continues to grow, how are organizations kind of rethinking this, and also rethinking their security logging strategy, just based off of your experience?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I started in this, so syslog's been around for a long time, over 20 years. When I first started in this industry, I was logging my routers and firewalls. And maybe if I had a Unix-based system or an AS400, now we're getting really dating myself a little, but we would have one system and one set of logs. Enter virtual machines, and now I have this VMware server. So I'm taking logs from VMware, and then I'm taking logs from the 16 to 50 systems that are running on that host hypervisor, right? So now my number of logs is not just the breadth that I have to collect logs from has increased exponentially. But then couple this with the pressure we've put on vendors to provide telemetry about their systems. That's something that has grown considerably. I remember telling vendors when I was working at a F1000 company that if your systems can't provide us any telemetry and log and tell us something what's going on, then we're not going to invest in them. We're going to look to other vendors, and they've responded. So now we have, in addition to the exponential growth in breadth, we have an exponential growth in depth of what we're getting sent to us as well. So you'll hear a term that is evolving in the industry called next gen SIEM, and it's more than automation and that kind of stuff. With our log scale platform, right, we are an index-free solution, and let me get into what we mean there. So a lot of times, like, there's an old Stack Overflow thread where someone is lamenting that their 3 gig database of actual data is taking up 30 gigs of space in their system.
Oh boy.
And the responses are, well, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. You need your indexes, and you need to have your replicas, and 30 gigs is perfectly reasonable. Now, today, I would call that technical debt, right? Now, the index-based solutions have served us well. In fact, I remember when someone showed me at RSA years ago, they said it's called NoSQL and it doesn't have an index, and I told them that was blasphemy. So how are you going to speed up your searches? I didn't know about Bloom filters, things like that. But you have this infrastructure bloat that comes with some of these legacy logging solutions. With LogScale, because it's index free, we can use compression. That same 3 gigabyte database, I looked on one of my demo systems earlier today. We have around a 3.5 gig data set, and it's taking up about 300 megs on space. Wow. So keep in mind when we're dealing with this challenge, right, it's not just the licensing costs, but it's also the infrastructure costs and then the performance that you get when these systems start to get big. So, if you look at, I think it's Statistica, or there's they're predicting that we're going to grow another third in terms of the amount of data that we have by 2025. Now, by 2025, we will be 3 times the amount of data we had in 2020. And 2020 doesn't seem that long ago. So we've got this issue of exponential growth in systems, and exponential growth in data. And our current investments in our legacy SIEM solutions, they're pushed to the max today, right? We already have running queries. We have, when I worked at another Fortune 500 company, I was joking, well, how many racks of data do you have supporting the SIEM? He said, I have rows. Now that's probably hyperbole. We tend to exaggerate, but I mean, it is very big, and it takes a lot of hardware to support them. That's heat. That's CapEx in some situations. So that can be really challenging. So the biggest thing that we're trying to do is you need to put yourself in a position to support the amount of data that you're going to need in the future. And that's probably a hybrid solution of taking pressure off of your legacy SIEM solutions, because they're not going anywhere. They're 20 years old and they're established. You can't just rip that out. But also, in addition to that, position yourself to say, hey, what can I do with this data deluge? And are there solutions that can accommodate the amount of data that I'm bringing in, where I don't have to put racks and racks of hardware to support them?
Also, just kind of determine whether or not that's actually data that you need to record, or if it's maybe something that doesn't really need to be logged per se. So think about what you're logging as well.
Sure.
No, that's awesome. That's really interesting what you mentioned on the NoSQL databases. I know for me personally, it was a bit of a mind shift, because early in my career, I used to work with a product that was SQL based. And so I did a lot of deployments where I'd be upgrading database servers, or you'd find this magical database server that's been in a closet for like 6 months and it hasn't been rebooted for a really long time. And you end up having to install like all of these Windows updates. So yeah, good times. So it's nice seeing that we're starting to see different types of database models out there. So, we've talked a little bit about, the fact that a lot of organizations are struggling with the sheer breadth of data that they're managing, but they're also looking for ways to not only get that visibility, but also automate for specific types of security workflows. Based on your experience, John, how can you automate incident response using a SIEM?
Yeah, so the automation, the first automation solution that I ever saw was something called OctoBlue. that a guy that Citrix had acquired years ago, and it was really interesting. And then, of course, Phantom and Demisto, now Palo Alto's SOAR solution, XSOAR. These are, I think, very useful tools for definitely providing some automation. But there's a great quote by Bruce Schneier. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember it verbatim, but basically said, listen, automation is great as long as you've got absolute certainty. The challenge isn't automation. The challenge is how do you get absolute certainty? I don't want to lock down a RID master or one of my, key Active Directory controllers, and I don't want to lock down or shut down my production SQL server, right? I mean, we've done a lot of work around delivering big data, so much so that it almost became a marketing drinking game, right? I mean, there was quite a bit of talk in the 2010s area around it, but what we failed to deliver with it is big context. So now the data has sort of become this weight that in particular with security, that they have to wield around, and it's really tough to fight a battle if you can't lift the club that you want to swing. So, while automating, system containment or killing processes, that shows really well on the floor at Black Hat and RSA. Or during a customer demo, my experience is the lion's share of the requests that I've gotten around automation is how can you deliver more context? Can you tell me more about this alert, right?
Yes.
I have a connection to a CIS-based country in Eastern Europe. I don't do business there. Fine, but now it says the domain matches mine except it's a .top instead of .com. The SSL issuer was Let's Encrypt, and the certificate is 30 minutes old. That's the kind of context that I would need, right, to be able to say, hey, shut this thing down, right? So those are some of the things that we want to leverage our SIEM solution, right? We want to, again, say yes to those logs and position customers to say yes and bring in that data. And then from there, being able to say, hey, let's assemble, let's marshal together the tuples, the keys that we need together so that we can deliver the level of context so that it makes automation and makes us a little more comfortable to do things like automation, or at least give the human better visibility. Again, automation around locking systems down and killing processes, again, that shows very well. But ultimately, if you can help adjudicate a detection much more faster, avoid the swivel chair, right? It is, and it's productivity killing to move from one console to another console and then try to search. It's just crushing. So if you can sort of automate that and give them all of that context as quickly as possible, like I said, 90% of the requests I get are how can you make this alert more contextually viable so that I don't have to swivel around so much. And so that's the big thing that we need to do is sort of leverage the information in our SIEM and come up with what kind of context do I need. And that can definitely be done with automation.
Yeah, absolutely. You certainly can't automate everything. You could, maybe if it's a high severity event, maybe notify a particular team that the event is occurring, but you certainly don't want to automate the entire environment. That's for sure, especially with false positives, right? So, no, that's great. So let's imagine that we are dealing with an active security event. If we were using our SIEM, how could we use it for not only minimizing the impact of the event, but maybe also using it for recovery?
Well, first thing, whenever I've responded and I've done my share of these to a breach, right, you want to find patient zero as quickly as possible, right? First, you're looking for where did it come, and that can be a system, but it can also be an account. It can be a user principal name or a SAM account name. But you want to figure out, if there's been any cross contamination. So my first job was out of college, I was the health inspector, and I had my share for in that line of work. A foodborne illness outbreak in a restaurant is the equivalent, and it's shocking the number of parallels that are in food safety and cybersecurity. Just happens in milliseconds with cybersecurity. But yeah, so you look for cross contamination. You look for, hey, where is this account gone, and then more importantly, where has this if there's an executable you're looking for, right? There are certain tells within a compromised system also. Lowering authentication protocols, NTLM v1, right? SMB v1. A lot of especially if it's not a well-written vulnerability or a binary, then it's going to leverage lower protocols, but also hidden share access. What I'm getting at is that there are certain tells that can position you to foil an attack really before they get out of the gate, right? Or contain it before it gets too bad. But then after that, you do need to have a SIEM to be able to see what systems do I need to restore, right? Because you want to see, the cross-contamination, and then you also, you also need to have the level of observability to be able to follow an attacker as they traverse your network. And that's one area where a SIEM can be very valuable for sure. And then lastly, I know it's not SIEM related, but you need to have an effective backup and recovery solution, right?
Right.
And, look, Cohesity can detect things and flag things, even maybe if this is, just from a backup. So though having that visibility, being able to provide that and thread that intelligence into the rest of your observability strategy is also very important.
And what's awesome about that is we do have a new integration with CrowdStrike, which gives you that visibility into the backup and recovery workflow. So, any alerts, any anomalies that appear will also appear within your SIEM solution. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. Yep. Yeah.
Well, so kind of based on our conversation, it really seems that there's been an evolution in log management, over the last 10 years. We've seen SIEMs becoming more analytical. Like you mentioned, a lot of companies are looking for ways to get a little more context on critical log events. They want to be able to tell a full story of what may have occurred so they can go back in and refine their security policies. So we're seeing them become more analytical. We're seeing them getting integrated into certain forms of security automation, because clearly we don't want to automate everything, but we do want to make sure that we have the ability to automate as needed. And also just making sure that we have that complete visibility into our data, whether that be coming from an on-prem workload or coming from one of our cloud environments. So those are my key takeaways. John, before we wrap up this session, did you have any other thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. I would point out, if you read our 2023 threat report, 71% of attacks were malware free. It's very important that we provide observability, right? Whether that's to an end user, whether that's to your algorithms that you're using, right? And at a time when, and you combat that through collecting as much data as possible and providing that visibility. And that will help you root out those things that aren't using malware. Legacy index-based solutions have served us well for 30 years. I have made my career on the work that I've done around those. But it is time they're starting to crumble under their own weight, whether that's the costs around licensing, infrastructure, or slow running on performance. And this is happening at a time when the data is growing exponentially. This is happening at a time when we need to ask our SIEM solutions and our log management solutions to do orders of magnitude more than they were previously doing, and that they're falling and crumbling under. So we definitely need to investigate, some, again, index-free, some next generation solutions that can both coexist and also take some of the pressure off of these incumbent legacy systems. And that, I think, is our best weapon in both two things: the current threat landscape and as I call it, the looming data deluge.
Oh, this is great information, John. I really love learning more about some of your experiences, just working in the industry and working with companies on how to uh, better or find their security. So it's been wonderful having you. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I do also want to encourage the audience to go out to crowdstrike.com, check out the Falcon log scale solution. It's an awesome product. It also integrates with Cohesity. In fact, if you go out to the Cohesity marketplace, you'll see that we do have an app for this now available that you can go and download, including great documentation on how to get set up within your environment. This is going to give you the ability to not only rapidly recover, but also give you the ability to identify a potential threat within your environment or a new security event as it occurs. You'll also get access to the Cohesity ransomware detection insights. So if we do see an anomaly within your backups, we'll notify you. And you can also gain access to this directly within the CrowdStrike Falcon platform. So definitely check that out. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this week. This wraps up another episode of Cohesity Tech Insights. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.